itu punya kutukan. Mas Sandra.
The film begins inside a grand, eerie mansion, littered with lifeless bodies. Among them, one man stands, terrified, and seemingly the sole survivor. Suddenly, a Carrie's dagger levitates mysteriously. Elsewhere, Nina informs her team that while they're not the ideal crew for this assignment, converting the home of a renowned collector's son into a museum might be their only shot at saving the agency. She emphasizes the urgency, only 3 days to complete the task. Hannah raises a concern, questioning how a timeline can be set without a proper assessment first. Nina agrees in theory, but insists the client has demanded it and is offering a generous bonus. Nina then divides responsibilities. Hannah and David will start drafting the plans, Ade is in charge of cost estimates, Randy and Nina will manage logistics, and Sandra will handle the interior design while collaborating with the curator. Sandra tries to lighten the mood, though she can't hide her confusion about why anyone would build a villa in such a secluded, signal-less place. He introduces Nina to Professor Durga, a historian assigned to catalog and curate the artifacts, since Randy himself knows little about the collection his father left behind. Durga then brings in his assistant, Mayank, who will be helping with database organization. 1:43. As the team gets to work, Hannah senses someone watching them. David notices her reaction but doesn't see anyone. A woman silently walks past, startling them both. Curious, Hannah asks who she is. David casually responds, the housemaid. Meanwhile, Nina admits to Randy that the property is much larger than she expected. There's no way she can finish the job in just 3 days. Randy explains that his late father and Nina's father began this project years ago, but it stalled due to the pandemic. Now, they're out of time. He tells her that if she can't handle it, he'll find someone who can. After a pause, Nina reluctantly agrees to try her best. In a flashback, we see Razang Wasanko on his deathbed. He urges Randy to preserve their ancestral artifacts, most of which are housed here. He insists these relics are a legacy that should be passed on, allowing future generations to understand their rich cultural roots. With that final wish, Razang peacefully passes away. That night, Sandra approaches Randy's sister, Bien, and notices her staring at a photo of Hannah. Sandra asks if Hannah looks familiar. Bien quickly gathers the pictures and tries to leave, but Sandra stops her. She shows Bien an article titled, Leaked Video of Woman with Initial H Goes Viral. Bien reacts, isn't this the domestic abuse case? The one where the husband threatened to leak private videos. Sandra presses, but Bien brushes her off, saying she doesn't want to talk about it. Sandra pouts, replying, you're no fun, before walking away. Later, Randy tells some to come in early the next morning to prepare breakfast for their guests. After she leaves, Durga confronts Randy about his reluctance to keep the relics his father treasured. He also asks Bien why she seems equally disinterested. Randy speaks for her, explaining that they both feel disconnected from the collection. He adds that Bien aspires to be a photographer, so her lack of interest makes perfect sense. Sandra nudges Bien to discuss the viral video, saying she even has the link. Suddenly, the lights flicker. Randy calmly explains that the electricity here is unpredictable and apologizes in advance in case it cuts again during the night. Bien, clearly frustrated, asks, we're staying here again? When Randy nods, she silently gets up and walks away. Nina turns to David and asks if they can really finish the project in 3 days. David shakes his head, doubtful. Nina responds, then we start tonight. Later on, Hannah vents to David about Sandra constantly mocking her past. David reminds her that he warned her repeatedly about Reno. Hannah sighs and says it all spiraled after the divorce. She confesses how painful it was when Sandra brought up the leaked video. She admits her mistakes, saying the marriage was short, but the scars run deep. David gently holds her hand, saying she knows how he truly feels about her, but before the moment can continue, Ade walks in to say Nina is waiting for him. While they prep for the night, Darmo hands David a flashlight in case the generator fails. He also gives Randy a walkie-talkie and says to call if anything comes up. Hannah informs Nina that all doors and windows in this wing are sealed, and they'll need to make modifications. Sandra wonders aloud why a house this size has only one entrance. At that moment, the power cuts again. Darmo fires up the generator. Nina suggests showcasing the rarest artifacts in this room. Durga agrees, noting this space has stable humidity, ideal for preserving pieces like the carries and other weapons. Sandra jokes that this will surely become the mansion's most haunted room, saying Carrie's blades are rumored to have supernatural energy. Hannah tells her to stop being ridiculous and focus, but Sandra throws a jab, asking why she's been so uptight ever since her adult film scandal. David snaps, telling Sandra to shut it, and Nina tries to de-escalate. David, however, keeps pushing, saying her words are toxic. In the tension, Sandra accidentally knocks over a relic. David calls her out for stirring trouble and bullying others. Frustrated, Sandra shoves him, and in doing so, triggers a hidden mechanism. A concealed door swings open, leaving everyone stunned. Randy, staring in shock, admits this is the first time he's ever seen that room. The team enters and finds a dusty basement, crammed with more ancient relics and an enormous statue looming in the shadows. Sandra immediately quips, "Now this is the most haunted room in the whole house." Hannah turns to Randy and asks if he knew this place existed. Randy quietly says he's realizing how little he truly knew about his father. Meanwhile, Mayung examines a stone slab and identifies the script as Pallava. She translates, "A long-lost kingdom, ruined by war and disaster." Durga whispers, "Jangala," explaining the kingdom's fall and the near erasure of its history. He recalls hearing, around the 1970s, about a relic that vanished during an excavation, but now, it's right before them. Sandra lifts a Caries from the display, gazing at it intensely, lost in thought. She accidentally cuts her thumb, and then something strange starts to happen. Bien turns to Durga, asking if relics can actually hold mystical power. Randy brushes it off, but Durga answers more seriously. He explains that Caries blades carry ceremonial importance, and many believe they bring fortune, or doom, to their wielders. David brings up the legendary MPU Gandrin Caries, asking if it's truly cursed. Durga replies that when historians examine these items, folklore is part of the equation. Even myths might carry slivers of ancient truths. He then shares a tale. When Samaratsaha became ruler, Jangala nearly fell in its war with Kudri. The Caries, revered as a divine weapon, was central to the conflict. All the smiths were summoned to forge a weapon of power, but Sandra interjects, revealing they were forced to craft a Caries meant to make Samaratsaha unbeatable. At that very moment, the lights flicker, and Sandra suddenly keels over, vomiting thick, black sludge, stunning everyone. She collapses. Randy and David rush to help her, carrying her to a nearby sofa. Nina softly asks if she's okay. Sandra opens her eyes, distant and strange. She stares at her own hand as if it's foreign. Then the lights go out. When they come back on, Sandra is gone. David panics, asking what's happening. Hannah turns to Randy, asking, "What was this room used for?" Randy has no answer, just a blank stare. Then, a noise echoes through the basement. Ade nervously suggests they leave. David insists they wait. Just then, Sandra reappears, perched on top of the statue. Her voice is chilling as she says, "The seventh Caries has awakened, and now, it wants blood." She vanishes again, leaving the team paralyzed in fear. Then, without warning, she lunges at Durga. She slams into him, dragging him across the floor. Durga crawls for help, but Sandra mounts him and drives the Caries deep into his chest. Everyone watches in horror. She screams wildly, then flings his lifeless body aside. She turns her eyes on the others. Randy yells for them to retreat and help Durga. They grab Durga and rush him up the stairs, but Randy sees Sandra banging her head on a pillar, mumbling, "Samaratsaha, the seventh, power." She snaps her head toward them and charges. As they flee, she collapses mid-chase, vomiting black liquid again. Randy, Bien, and Hannah try to seal the door behind them, but Sandra blocks it, forcing them to keep running. Mayung mutters that she warned Sandra not to touch the Caries. Nina urgently asks, "Who has the code?" Before anyone can reply, Sandra appears again, storming toward them. She shoves Nina hard against the door, breaking the lock. She leans in and licks Nina's face, horrifying the group. David grabs a vase and smashes it on her head. It does nothing. Sandra kicks him aside like he's weightless. Randy finds a ceremonial spear, charges, and drives it through her, pinning her to the door. With Sandra subdued, they frantically search for another way out, but suddenly, the spear rips free. Sandra is back on her feet. She throws a heavy pot at them, scattering the group in panic. David, Randy, Durga, and Bien take shelter in the kitchen, while the rest lock themselves in another room. Without warning, the power cuts out, and Sandra begins pounding frantically at the other's door, desperate to get in. David tells Randy they need something to stop Durga's bleeding. As Randy searches, he knocks over a few glasses. Sandra's spine-chilling laughter echoes through the house. David, thinking fast, uses his jacket to apply pressure to Durga's wound. Durga tries to speak about the Caries, but a noise cuts him off, and the kitchen door creaks open by itself. Randy glances through the gap. No one's there. He whispers they should move that way. As they crawl, an eerie voice fills the air. They look up and see Sandra levitating in a shadowy corner. Sandra grins wickedly and signals Bien to keep silent. David looks her way, but she's suddenly gone. Kitchen items begin crashing down without cause. In the chaos, Sandra appears and seizes Durga, dragging him onto the table. With terrifying calm, she slices Durga's face, skin peeling like wet paper. She then guts him and drops his intestines on the floor. She scans the room. Above the cabinets, Ade hides quietly, while another curve forms on the cursed blade. David questions Randy about the basement, but Randy deflects. Bien steps in, revealing she and Randy hated the mansion and know nothing more. Randy recalls their father, obsessed with collecting relics, even after a mysterious break-in left intruders and guards dead. Instead of reporting the deaths, their father increased security. The house became more sealed off, more irrational. David asks, "Are you saying there's no way out?" Just then, Randy remembers the hand-talkie Darmo gave him. He urgently asks Bien about it, she hasn't seen it. Meanwhile, Darmo powers up the generator, and lights flicker back on. Nina mutters this must be the worst day of her life and says she's going to die. Hannah urges her not to lose hope. Ade creeps out of hiding and tries to contact Darmo with the hand-talkie but realizes it's off. He switches it on. A loud static crackle erupts, and Sandra's chilling laugh rings out again. Darmo inputs a code to unlock the front door, but the keypad is dead. He resorts to a manual key. As he steps inside, something feels wrong. He starts searching, but runs directly into Sandra. She lunges, plunges the carries into his throat, then decapitates him in one fluid motion. Another curve appears on the blade. Sandra hurls Darmo's head at Nina and the others. They scream and run. Sandra chases them, leaps onto a table, and tackles Hannah. Hannah holds her off, pleading for her to come back to her senses. With a burst of strength, Hannah kicks her away. Mayung grabs a fork. Nina lands a blow. Mayung stabs the fork into Sandra, and Hannah shoves her down. Sandra rises, pulls the fork from her back, and drives it into Nina. Hannah retaliates, rushing to Nina's side. Sandra advances, but David strikes her with a stool. Together, the group pins Sandra against the wall. Sandra reaches for David. He yells at Hannah to get Nina to safety. David tells Mayung to run. They flee. Bien guides them to the basement where Randy is hiding. Meanwhile, Hannah and Nina barricade themselves in another room. David admits nowhere feels safe. Bien says they can't stay hidden forever. Randy warns that leaving now could get them killed. He doesn't want to lose her. David argues, "That door won't hold forever. You want this basement to be our tomb?" Randy says the master key is their only way out, and Darmo had it. Sandra pounds on Hannah's door. Hannah hides under the bed. Bien finds her father's journal. Mayung reads it aloud. "Accursed carries was forged with malice. Each life it takes causes the blade to bend. Once it kills 7, the blade straightens, and brings ruin upon Jangala." Randy realizes 7 must die. David, worried for Hannah, bolts. Sandra breaks down the door. Hannah and Nina watch as she enters. Then disappears. Suddenly, she reappears, grabs Nina, and stabs her. Hannah, frozen, watches Nina die. The blade curves again. The lights flicker out. In the dark, Hannah tries to escape, but cuts her hand on broken glass. The noise gives her away. Sandra closes in, but David arrives. Mayung and Bien follow moments later. Sandra snarls, "Feed your souls to the ashes," and stabs David. He tosses the carries aside. Sandra throws him across the room. As Bien tries to get the blade, Sandra attacks. Hannah hits Sandra, making her drop the blade. Randy grabs it and tells Mayung to help Bien. Hannah lands another blow, breaking Sandra's leg and knocking her out. Ade, still hiding, calls to Randy asking where Sandra is. Randy tells him to shut up and move. As Hannah and Mayung help David outside, Sandra wakes up. Bien warns, "The cursed blade marks its victims. They may not survive." Mayung solemnly agrees. Sandra's scream pierces the air as she descends the staircase. Randy and Ade search for Darmo's body. Suddenly, Sandra's laughter returns. To their horror, she's charging at them. David says they need Darmo's keys to escape. Bien says they've searched everywhere, except the living room. She and Mayung head there, while David and Hannah wait at the door. Randy tries to fight Sandra but is overpowered. She slits his neck. He escapes and locks himself inside a room. Enraged, he yells at Ade for abandoning him. Ade snaps back. He never wanted to be part of this. He mocks Randy's privilege. "You were born rich, but now you'll die. I'll die, and so will Bien. Your father cursed us all." Blinded by rage, Randy beats him to death with a relic. Meanwhile, Mayung and Bien retrieve the keys from Darmo's corpse. At the front door, David and Hannah wait in silence. She says she wishes they'd met under better circumstances. David replies, "I came into your life too late." Staring at Ade's corpse, Randy mutters, "For down. 3 more." Mayung and Bien arrive breathless at the front door, keys clutched tightly in hand. They fumble with the lock in panic. But then, out of the shadows, Sandra emerges, eyes blazing. Bien finally unlocks the door, and they all burst outside. They sprint until they reach a quiet park nearby, collapsing behind some benches, gasping for air. Mayung slowly peers around the corner. Nothing, no Sandra. She rises to her feet. But in a flash, Sandra explodes from the darkness, tackling her to the ground. Hannah scans frantically, and spots a nearby grass cutter. Sandra plunges the carries into Mayung's thigh. Mayung screams, writhing in pain. Without hesitation, Hannah powers the cutter and rushes Sandra. Slamming the spinning blades into her head, the machine chews through her skull and sends her flying. Hannah rushes to Mayung's side, but Sandra, bloodied and twitching, begins crawling toward the carries. David, wounded but determined, lunges forward and grabs the weapon. With a scream of effort, he mounts Sandra and drives the blade straight down her throat. Her body stiffens, then goes still. Another curve forms on the cursed blade. They help David to the door. Bien says she's going back for Randy. Hannah joins her. Suddenly, David's body convulses violently. Mayung screams for help, realizing he's exhibiting the same signs Sandra did. Before they can act, David thrusts the carries into Mayung's stomach, his eyes now dark and empty. David is no longer David. The curse has claimed him. Hannah freezes. Bien slams the door shut. Just then, Randy appears, and Bien shouts, "Sandra's gone, but David's infected." A thunderous noise erupts overhead. Randy looks up. "We need to get to the basement." Before they can move, David crashes through the ceiling like a demon unleashed. They race to the basement. David slams against the door behind them. Randy braces it and shouts, "It won't hold long." Bien, trembling, says she's not ready to die. "Then don't," Randy urges, "we still have a chance." He explains that 6 are dead. If they kill whatever's inside David, the nightmare might end. Hannah recoils. Killing it means killing him. Hannah stands up, eyes wild. "It can't be that simple, you all sound insane." The door shatters. David storms into the basement, eyes glowing with rage. He approaches Hannah, growling, "Let the world fade, blood seals the legacy." He lunges. Randy pushes a heavy statue onto him, crushing David to the floor. Hannah hurries over and kneels beside him. She gazes into his eyes. There's nothing human left. Shaking, she picks up the carries and drives it into his heart. David screams, a raw, unnatural wail, before falling silent. Randy exhales. "That's 7. Suddenly, Bien collapses and vomits, just like Sandra had. Hannah drops the carries in horror. Randy looks down at the blade, only 6 curves. "Ade," he gasps, "he didn't die by the carries." Before anyone can react, Randy turns on Hannah and lunges with the blade. She dodges, knocks him over, and grabs a nearby stone foundation block. Screaming in fury, she slams it down onto him, again, and again. Then, in a blind rage, she grabs an artifact and drives it into Randy repeatedly until he stops moving. She turns to Bien, now overtaken by the curse. But Hannah lowers the weapon. "I can't live with this anymore," she whispers, "you still have a chance." She stabs herself with the carries, collapsing in Bien's arms. With her final breath, she reaches out and clutches David's hand. The curse lifts from Bien in an instant. She gasps as clarity returns, and surveys the bodies around her. The carries lies still, now fully straight, its evil sealed once more. Morning light pours through the trees. Some and a rescue team arrive to find Bien sitting in silence, eyes full of tears. Months later, the mansion is reborn as a museum. Deep in the basement, the carries waits, quiet, watching.